what happens if you lose your job during the co-op purchase process here in New York City. I'm Nick at Houseit. If you are buying in New York City or the adjacent areas, we can save you money through a buyer agent commission rebate. You can learn how that works and request a rebate by visiting our website, houseit.com, or you could give me a call directly. You could also text me. The number is below on the screen, 888-494-8258. So let's go ahead and get started on today's topic, which is what happens if you lose your job while purchasing a co-op in New York City. First, let's take a step back and understand what the risk is. The risk is the fact that you have typically made a 10% contract deposit at the time of signing the purchase contract. So if you're buying a $1.5 million co-op, you essentially have $150,000 of skin in the game. Now, in the normal course, if you have a mortgage contingency, whether you're buying a condo or a co-op, you have protection up until the point of receiving or not receiving a commitment letter from the lender. So if you sign the contract, you make your escrow deposit, and the lender is working on the underwriting aspect, and all of a sudden you lose your job, well, they simply just won't give you the loan in the first place, in which case, irrespective of whether you're buying a condo or a co-op, you can generally trigger your mortgage contingency, you can back out, you'll get your money back, you tear up the contract and walk away, meaning the only thing you've really lost is your time. But now let's pivot to a co-op. Let's say that you've already received your commitment letter and you've submitted the board package. Well, what happens then if you lose your job while the board is reviewing your application? Well, at this point, let's look at the standard co-op contract in New York City. Now, typical contracts, boilerplate contracts for co-ops in New York City state something to the effect of this sale is subject to the unconditional consent of the co-op corporation. Now, what this means is basically if you get rejected, you can trigger the contingency in the contract that we just read, and you can back out and you can get your money back. So it's not really a big deal, actually, if you lose your job. With respect to the risk associated with your deposit for a co-op, you, per the contract, have gotten rejected by the board, you can back out. The other option is in the event that the co-op says, you know, hey, it's unfortunate that you lost your job, but we took a look at your finances, you have a huge amount of cash, your partner also has some income coming in, and we really like you, so we want to make this work. So we will approve you conditioned on you putting a certain amount of money in escrow, perhaps 3 years of co-op maintenance payments, and you'll have to basically agree to those terms in order to move forward. Now, because they've put forward conditions on the approval, once again, that allows you to trigger the verbiage in the contract. As we mentioned, this sale is subject to the unconditional consent of the co-op corporation. They've put conditions in play. As such, you are allowed to back out and get your money back. So the long and short of it is, you actually, in theory, have more protections with respect to a co-op compared to a condo as it relates to a job loss. This is because with a condo, once you've received your mortgage commitment letter, technically you've satisfied the contingency, at which point, if you lose your job between commitment letter and closing, you arguably don't really have any protection. You still theoretically have to close, and that is a problem. You know, it's obviously the odds are very low, but if you lose your job and then 3 days before closing, the lender calls your HR department and they state that you've lost your job, they simply or probably will not show up to closing and they won't fund your loan. So at that point, you do risk a default. But in the case of a co-op, most co-ops typically have verbiage somewhere in the purchase agreement that basically obligates you to disclose any material change in financial circumstances. So even in the crazy instance that you've had the interview, you've gotten board approval, and then closing is scheduled, but all of a sudden you lose your job, technically, per the co-op rules, in most cases, you have to disclose that to the co-op, at which point they could perhaps revoke your unconditional approval, in which case you can walk away and get your deposit back. So in short, if you lose your job when you're buying a co-op, you have several protections that will ensure that you don't potentially lose your deposit. The first protection applies to condos and co-ops is the mortgage contingency if you have one. And then the second protection is just the standard language in basically all co-op contracts that states that the sale is subject to the unconditional consent of the co-op corporation. So whether or not you lose your job before you submit the board application, while they're reviewing your application, or even after they've approved you, if at any point you disclose a change in circumstance, you theoretically might lose that approval and you can get your money back. So condos, on the other hand, as we mentioned, don't have that same protection. If you get the mortgage commitment letter and you lose your job, there's nothing else really in the contract that would allow you to very cleanly exit the deal and get your money back. So we hope you found this video to be helpful. As a friendly reminder, please consult your attorney on legal matters. We cannot give legal advice, but hopefully this video provides you with the general framework in terms of how to assess risk, perhaps even if you haven't even yet started the purchase process for a co-op or any apartment, quite frankly, here in New York City. And remember that we can save you money here at Houseit through a buyer agent commission rebate. You can learn more by visiting our website, houseit.com. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below this video, and we'll see you on the next one.